Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin. Kyle, that was your cue. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's meeting, October 2020. Today we have two great guests, Ludo Smolsky and Victoria Rowell. We're going to start off with Ludo. Ludo is a development consultant and story editor, currently working on several fiction and documentary feature projects funded by the British Film Institute, Film 4, Creative Europe, Irish Film Board, Nice Screen, and Scottish Screen. He has worked on a range of independent films, from John S. Baird's Filth to Bruce Goodison's Leave to Remain. In 2017, he had a 6-month script development workshop with the British Council in the Caribbean, in conjunction with Trinidad and Tobago's Film Festival and Jafta and Jampro, and acted as a script consultant for the Writers' Room, a workshop and forum for British and Arab filmmakers at Dubai International Film Festival. Welcome, Ludo.
Good night.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you, Adrian?
It is late. Let's get on with this.
No, it's good. It's good. I'm here. I'm ready to go.
All right. How did you get into story editing? What was your journey?
The old "What's my story?" question. I actually, thinking about the "What's my story?" question, it reminds me when I first came to Jamaica for the first film lab, and I was heavily sleep deprived on a very, very delayed flight, and with a bag that seemed to have circumnavigated the globe before it actually finally popped out on the carousel at the airport. And I found myself facing a lot of questions from the immigration officer. And it was becoming a lengthy conversation. I was practically falling asleep on my feet. I mean, you know that feeling. And I had to explain to him about the film lab, what it was all about. And after a lot of back and forth and kind of like an unexpectedly detailed conversation about what constitutes a Jamaican story, I was very interested in that. This curious immigration officer said to me, "So what's your story?" I said to him, "My story is by Samuel Beckett, and it's called Waiting for Baggage at Norman Manley." And he laughed, and I invited him to the workshop. Unfortunately, he didn't come, but I always thought that was my introduction to Jamaica, and I haven't had an interrogation like that since, really. But I started on that particular journey to Norman Manley. I didn't study film at university. I studied ecology many years ago. I saw there was no future in that, and I had spent a lot of my time at university and before that actually involved in making films and theatre, and decided to try and see if I could do something creative and get into film in some way, shape or form professionally. And I ended up, like a few of us, getting a running job, just the entry level job for what was then a very new independent production company. And that was it. I was away at that point, because you just learn so much, a new company, you're asked to do so much, you learn on the job, and with some very, very generous execs at that company showing me the ropes and indulging me in my naivety, gave me a peek behind the curtain of the industry generally, and script development in particular. And I thought, like anybody else, someone wrote a script and then someone else went and shot it. But it turned out that it was a bit more complicated than that. Yes, and the way it was more complicated was intriguing to me. Yeah. And I became fascinated by that. So kind of why I ended up working a few more years in in film and television drama production, but I had got the script bug at that point, and I was reading a lot of scripts, doing a lot of coverage, reading anything that anyone would give me, anything that I could get my hands on, talking to people about those scripts. Now, having worked for that production company, talking to some really top writers that were coming in and having meetings, and I was making them coffee and getting them taxis and stuff like that, but you were able to have a bit of a conversation with them. And then I found a new organization at the time called the Script Factory, and they had started doing something quite interesting, which was to take film screenplays by A-list writers, big writers in the UK, but take scripts from them that were on projects that had basically hit a roadblock, that basically weren't going to happen for some reason, whether somebody else made a movie about the same subject, or in some way the project was torpedoed and this script existed that no one was never going to see the light of day. So the Script Factory had this great idea of saying, well, let's get some cool actors together and let's do a performed reading of that script that's never going to be filmed. And when I met that company, they were starting to look at working with newer writers and see if they could, get involved in helping to train and bring up newer writers and develop talent, and also help the industry access that talent. And that started a long fruitful journey for me. And I spent, many happy years working with them as part of their training team, just basically training people how to analyze scripts, how to deliver feedback to writers, and doing a lot of screenwriter training and training for people who were working with screenwriters. And that was at a time in the UK, which was where that kind of thing was there was a need for that to be discussed. There's a real thirst for that to be discussed, and the industry was getting behind that as well. So there's a lot of support for that. So, and I ended up being part of workshops and development programs in the UK and around Europe and the world. And before I knew it, I was a script editor and developer.
Right. So with all that experience and reading all those scripts,
mm-hmm.
the whole idea of what constitutes a story or a cogent script, so many people have different ideas, and there are books and written about it, and endless videos and training sessions. What would you say are Ludo's essentials of story?
Well, yeah, I mean, that changes on any given day. And I mean, I was, in Jamaica at the end of last year, although it feels like a decade ago now. But I did a lecture on that. So I don't want to repeat that or try and put it into a 5-minute answer.
Yeah, just
But my takeaway is that there is the Billy Wilder quote of just don't bore your audience. Just do not bore your audience. And I think that it's kind of a slightly passive aggressive note, but I think it's what I take from that is tell your story to other people, see what their reaction is. Where do they switch off? Do they ask for more information? Do they want to know more? What do they want to know more about? And just keep retelling your story and to different people in different ways. And I think that helps you. The more you talk about that your story with people, the better it get. The more you understand it and how it's going to work on the page.
Right.
So I think it's hard with essentials of story because, of course, there's no one way of telling a story. There's no one way of making a film. And film itself is a very young medium, right? I mean, we've been talking about the death of cinema since its inception, but it's only 120 years old. I mean, compared to most other arts, it's still got a few millennia to go to catch up. So I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, there is so much written about it, but can you imagine in a 1,000 years time they'll look back on this and laugh?
Yeah, sure, for sure. Right. So when you get a new script, just so our membership can understand what a story editor does.
Yeah.
What is it? What's your process when you get a new script as a story editor? What's your approach?
Right. So there's a couple of answers to that, really. One is just to explain what's happening on a business level, on an industrial level. So I'm generally speaking hired by a producer to work on a project. That producer, we're fortunate in the UK to have a lot of public funding. So there is that producer can access finance to pay for people like me to do that. And I will, in terms of actually just taking a job, and there is, I tend not to go on the script. I tend to go on the person, the writer. Do I feel like this is somebody that I can help? Is there going to be enough of a relationship here for us to gain some sort of traction and establish some kind of trust? And then if they definitely want to hire me and I definitely want to do it, then what happens at that point is for me, analyzing the material. So that's reading the script and working out what it's about, what it's really about, why it works, why it doesn't work, and going into
transcribing it like beat for beat, just so you
can. No, sometimes, but normally it's working out the premise and as you know, Adrian, I'm a bit of a stickler for what that actually means, and that there is what is at the core of this story. And films work on a number of different layers, and they're built very often out of a core that sometimes the writer doesn't even know what that is, and that's fine, right? But for me as a reader and as somebody who's thinking about how this is going to work in front of an audience, what I need to do is try and look at how the film is engaging the audience, and then look under the hood and see how that engine works. And then I will sit down and have a meeting with the writer about what their intentions are for it, and ask them questions about their work, and then steer that into a conversation about what the next draft might look like. And then we come to some agreement about what needs to be focused on and what needs to be addressed. And I write up my notes and I send them to the producer. And then the producer says, "Those are great," and said, or not, and then sends them to the writer, and they go away and write a new draft, or write an outline or a beat sheet, or whatever it is that we've discussed that needs to be done. And that is the process. And then they submit it, and then I go through that process, rinse and repeat again and again and again. And so that's how that side of things works for us. I mean, there's no one way to develop a script and a screenplay, but that's and every project is different, but that's the kind of bare bones of it from my side.
Right. So you're currently on your second tour of duty now with the British Council, working.
Do I get a medal?
Yeah, you should. Yes. Have you noticed any differences in the style or structure of the Jamaican scripts that you've seen as compared to the ones you normally see?
Ooh. No.
Okay, moving on.
I mean, I think I think that of the Jamaican scripts that I've read, through applications to the film lab, the ones on the film lab, the ones that I've come across in my time over the last few years as I've got to know Jamaica more. I mean, it's pretty much similar to anywhere else in that you can see the domination of the American industry.
Right.
It's the same here. It's the same wherever I go around the world. And I don't mean that pejoratively. It's just a matter of fact that we know historically and still now Hollywood dominates film storytelling. And therefore, when people come to write films, they tend to write from what they understand a film to be. And there is, so I see that in the work in Jamaica as I do, anywhere else. So yeah, I think it's interesting. We might come on to this in another conversation, but never underestimate the power of cultural specificity. When since I've been, working with you guys in Jamaica, there's always been a conversation around, and something of an argument around the issue of, do you write in patois? Do you write, how much, vernacular do you put in? Yeah. How much is going to be understood? Yeah. And, audiences want cultural specificity, right? That you've got to write from your place. Otherwise, you're just writing something that anybody else could write anywhere around the world. And I understand the fear that, like, well, hang on a sec, if I write it too specific, then nobody else is going to understand it. But actually, it's counterintuitive to that. But actually, that's what people want. They want difference.
Speaking of the film lab, can you give us an update as to where we are?
Right. So I came over in December to kick things off, and during that time, the 4 projects and 12 people have been developing those 4 projects, and now Jafta and Jampro have done a great job in trying to get the work film lab back on track. No small feat in this year, and they have recently completed 2 online workshops, one in producing and one in, why am I telling you this? You were on it. Telling everybody else, one in producing and one on marketing and distribution. And so now we're at the stage where the scripts are still being developed, and Jampro are looking at finding a way to present these to market or to people in the marketplace in some way, shape or form. The current situation makes that a little bit tricky, but the feeling is by the end of the year we should be able to do that. And I think discussions are ongoing as to the best way, and there's hopefully, from my latest conversations with the organizers, there should be some sort of clarity on that relatively shortly, and then that will be the end of that.
Right, fantastic. Well, it's been a fantastic process so far.
Good.
Every single one of you, it's been amazing. So I just want to say at this point, if anyone has any questions, please raise your hands. I've got 2 more questions to ask Ludo, and then we're going to open it up, and I'm going to have you guys just talk directly to him. I'm not going to read the questions. I think it's more interactive that way. So for me, going through this process in Film Lab, one of the most challenging things has been to figure out the active versus passive protagonist. And I'll think that my protagonist is active, and then you telling me no, she's not. I'm like, well, what? Why? So what can you what tips can you give us as writers, as creators, how we can ensure our protagonist is active and not a passive character?
Well, they can be passive, right? You know, I mean, that's the first thing, but you just have to make sure that their passivity is interesting in some way, shape, or form, that it is the problem in the story. You know, and I think that's so. You know, the first thing is you know, what does it mean, right? When someone is and you know, you have to be careful with when the feedback that you're given as a writer, because people trot terms out and they may not be using in the same way that you understand them. So, you know, always ask questions back. I think when you get that kind of feedback, if only just to try and zero in on what's actually being said. Yeah, I mean, passivity can be fine. You know, it's the character's problem is that they don't know what to do about the situation, or sometimes that they don't know what the real problem is, right? So that the audience might be ahead of them, and that creates some dramatic tension. So that's fine, right? There's some suspense.
Could you simply just explain what an active protagonist is versus a passive, just for those?
Okay, so my understanding would be that an active protagonist, an active character, is a character that has a conscious want, a desire to do something that they're very much aware of, and they are we watch them trying to achieve that. Okay, so they're actively trying to achieve whatever that goal is, to go and make a cup of tea, or to save the world, or whatever it happens to be. That's what they're driven to do. We understand that. That's what their motivation is, and hopefully in the story there is some obstacles in the way which are preventing them from doing that. So there we can see how desperately they want that thing. If they're passive, we don't really understand what they want from what they're doing, right? And that can create a problem, because it can lead to there actually being no story. The thing is that if their problem is that they, you know, they're in a situation and they don't know what to do, then they will spend a lot of time wondering what to do. That can be funny, yeah. That could be nail biting. You know, it's the obligation on the storyteller to find a way of making that particular conflict manifest in the story in some way, shape, or form. So there's no, I don't see it as active good, passive bad. Most characters tend to be active. It's a more obvious way of writing a story, but it's by no means the only. And I think that there is, you know, I think point of view is your friend here. You know, what do the audience understand the problem to be? And also sometimes it can be, there can be an external problem, you know, in the character's outside world to deal with, but really the problem that the film is concerned about is an internal one, for the one that the character is actually unaware of. So actually what the film needs to do is use that external conflict to bring about that understanding in some way, shape, or form. That will happen normally sort of 2/3 of the way through the film, or 3/4 of the way through the film. And then they go, oh, all right, I see, that's what I was supposed to be doing. And then they can get on with the final act of the story and be more active about achieving that. So there's, you know, there's lots of ways of presenting it. What you want to try and avoid is us just not knowing any of that. We don't know what the character wants. The character doesn't know what they want. We don't know what they want. We end up not caring what they want. Where's the story here? Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
So I'd say it's more of a passive story than a passive character.
Okay. All right, last question, and then we're going to open it up to the floor. This is actually probably the biggest question. I'm going to ask Victoria the same question, because I think it's important to get two sides of the industry, what their perspective is. But the pandemic has turned the whole movie distribution thing on its head. You know, 500 cinemas closing across the US and the UK. The latest Bond film pushed back to 2020. Disney is moving all their releases to online. So it's like streaming is the way to go. But then Netflix just released their figures showing a slowdown in subscribers, and their stocks are tanking. So where do you see things going for the film distribution model over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. Yes, that is a big question. So, number one, like a lot of people, I'm certainly of the view that the pandemic is accelerating a lot of things that were happening anyway in the industry. And it's, you know, it's carnage out there. Of course it is. But there are a lot of conversations already taking place about what might be built back up out of the ashes of this. And, you know, I mean, Ted Hope, who ran Good Machine and was at Amazon Studios until recently, he's been talking a lot about this in a very optimistic way, that, you know, once we get through the pain, there is a real opportunity, particularly for the independent sector, to build something much more audience friendly and artist friendly, right? Much more equitable, because, you know, I mean, you can sell something to Netflix, but you don't know how it does, right? You don't know if it, and you may be able to judge that it's successful because of the social media interaction around it, but you're never going to get any figures from them, and there is no profit participation. The figure is the figure, right? That it's bought for at the beginning, and there is no back end, right? So, you know, Netflix has changed the game, absolutely, but it's not the be all and end all. And I think that there are, you know, there's the possibility, particularly for the independent sector, to, as now, you know, the exhibition sector, you know, the cinemas go through this particularly painful period of, you know, setting something up which is better for both. But actually, I'll put a link in the chat later. Ted Hope speaking to the guys at Film London, but that's an open session. That's tomorrow London time at 4:30 in the afternoon. So if any of you are around tomorrow, I'll pop the link in the chat. He's very, very good on the you know, global international independent film.
Do you think there's any possibility of the opposite happening, where the studios now forward integrate and start buying up the theater chains? As you know, the Trump administration rolled back the Paramount rule, which stopped studios from buying.
Yeah, I think it's a possibility. It's a possibility, but I think that there's still enough buildings out there, and I think one of the things that independent distribution has shown, that they have been quite clever and resourceful about getting a movie to play on big screens without having to be in a bona fide cinema.
Right.
And I think there will be more of that. And I think some cinemas may well be more open to it. I mean, we have quite a large number of independent cinemas in the UK. Certainly not in terms of screens, but in terms of buildings, there's like 35% genuinely independent cinemas here. And, you know, that will be to independent filmmakers, you know, strength to play on that in the coming years.
Absolutely. All right, great. Thank you so much, Ludo. I think we'll just take some questions from the floor. Annalisa, do you have anybody there? I'm not seeing how to see if anybody's got their hand up or any questions.
Kevin has a question.
Okay, Kevin.
Hey, Ludo, how are you doing?
Good.
Good to see you. All right. So my question earlier, you had said that, you know, everybody is kind of writing based on what they understand of film, which tends to be, you know, the United Oh, someone's asking to start my video. All right, no problem. I want to see my face. Yeah. So you're saying everybody seems to kind of write in that American expected format. But you say that people are looking for different. One of the things that people do fear when writing different is that, you know, maybe people might not get it, or they might not understand it, or even studio execs, you know, might not greenlight it because it doesn't match what they're expecting. How do you write something different, but at the same time ensure that, you know, people get it? Is there some kind of formula to structure your story in a way that gives you that flexibility?
Yeah. Okay. So I think I'd say straight away there, Kevin, that if you're writing for a studio, then you write for a studio and you write to the studio's expectations. But if you're writing for the independent sector, then there's no point trying to write a studio film. Studios do that. And you know, and I think that there is, you know, there's much more opportunity actually. Although independent film has been shrinking for quite some time, I still think there's more opportunity for, well, there's obviously more opportunity for first time and second time filmmakers in independent cinema than there is and is ever going to be in studio films. So and I think what's interesting is what the SVODs have done here, what Netflix particularly has broken out, is this realization that that there is this huge market out there for non-studio and non-English product. And you know, I mean, Ted Hope was talking about this, who I mentioned, was talking about this the other day on a panel in which, you know, he was saying that one of the big changes that he's noticed in the last 10 years is that everybody who he talks to about their viewing habits, be that film or TV, is that, you know, is that there is, everybody now is watching things which are genuinely international, you know, and that they're quite happy to watch things in another language. And that chimes with my experience too. That used to be quite a niche thing, and it was always considered niche, but now everybody's watching everything from everywhere, and there is a real thirst to. And if you look at, I'm pretty sure that if you look at the sort of what Netflix has been putting out and will continue to put out over the next couple of years, there will be more and more and more local, what they call local storytelling. And I think you've got to be, you know, that's where you've got to be looking, because, you know, unless you absolutely want to write a studio picture and that's what you want to do, and that's where you're going to go to one of the 5 studios or whatever it is now, then the local storytelling is really where it's at. I mean, I give you just to ram home that point actually. So one of the Netflix in the UK have just appointed a new head of film. So they have all their heads of department were in place except for film, and they recruited for those heads of department were all senior execs in other broadcast companies that came across to the Netflix team in the UK as it's been built up over the last year or so. And the head of film that they've just appointed has next to no commissioning experience at all. Her name's Fiona Lamte. She's an old student of mine, I'm happy to say, and absolutely delighted for her. But what she does have is a track record in unearthing stories from underrepresented groups in the UK, and that's what they want. And you just look at that. You just look at that one appointment, and you can see exactly where they're heading, what they want, what they're looking for. And they've not gone with the old guard for film, they've gone with a new. And I think that's telling, and I think you'll see that more in across other platforms over the coming years.
It would be, what's the best way to get noticed, you know, doing independent?
You know? Yeah, I think I mean, it's always the way is making stuff. You know, whatever it is, if it's whether you're blogging, whether you're making shorts, whether you're putting on plays, you just whether you're painting. I don't know, whether you're just making stuff that is interacting with the world in some way, shape, or form. Somebody's going to see it and somebody's going to like it. And you can't. I mean, you know enough of the stories, Kevin. I'm sure, but nobody is born is made a successful filmmaker overnight. There is a journey for everyone. We had the London Film Festival here recently, and which was in a somewhat reduced form. But I don't know if you know Kemp Powers, the playwright and screenwriter. So he wrote a play called One Night in Miami, and put it on. He was a journalist. He wrote this. He was interested in this particular story, particularly around Sam Cooke, who was a friend of Cassius Clay, and he found this story about when Cassius Clay first became heavyweight champion of the world at a young age, and after the fight, Malcolm X, who was a good friend of Cassius Clay's, was in charge of the after party, and Cassius Clay, Sam Cooke, and Jim Brown, the NFL All-Star, were in a room with Malcolm X after Cassius Clay had just become world heavyweight champion and beat Sonny Liston. And nobody knows what happened in that room, right? So Kemp Powers, a journalist by trade, he's trying to write a book on this thing, ends up writing a play, and it's put on in a 50-seater auditorium in, I don't know, somewhere on the outskirts of LA. Mind you, everywhere's on the outskirts of LA and LA. But anyway, and then within days, all of the American theatre fraternity knows about this play, and then it goes on, gets put on in Baltimore, and then it transfers to London, and it goes into bigger theatres, and then someone buys the film rights, and then he adapts it, and now it's a film directed by Regina King. Meanwhile, Pixar give him a call and say, we're working on this movie, will you come and help us out? And now he's got, not only has he got One Night in Miami, he's now co-writer and co-director of Soul. Okay, and that started with him trying to write a book and then realizing that nobody knew what happened, so he couldn't write a book on it because there was actually no testimony, and he ended up writing a play to imagine what happened. Now, he didn't start out going, I want to get noticed. He started out going, I'm interested in Sam Cooke. So that's it, really. Be interested.
Yeah. Are you good, Kevin? Did that cover everything?
Yeah, man, that covers everything for me.
Lovely to see you, Kevin, and your little one.
Hey, yeah, man.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. So Ludo, it looks like you're off the hook.
There's some Kurt waving.
Was Kurt waving? Oh, Kurt has a question?
I might be on Adrian's page too. I don't know.
Listen, I'm the one that messed up Adrian, not Kurt. Don't hold it against me.
I know it's not a race car. No, just really quick. I wanted to say again, just starting off as Kevin did with the whole idea of leaning so much into the American, the Hollywood style of writing, which I know. I mean, personally, I grew up on, and I mean, in growing up in Jamaica in the 80s, we had one TV station.
Can you turn up your volume a bit, Kurt? Can you turn up your volume a bit?
What's that?
No, I'm not hearing any. I'm having difficulty hearing. Are you hearing, Ludo?
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay,
I can hear.
Okay.
Basically, all I wanted to know was, it's relatively easy personally for me to find resources if I want to find a script or 2 or 10 from various TV shows based in the States or movies. It's relatively easy. But, you know, also enjoying things like the style and the influence of things like, say, Peaky Blinders and Luther, and that more, you know, that BBC One style of storytelling. That has not been as easy. Is there any sort of resource that you?
Yeah, I'll put a link in the chat as well. So something called the BBC Writers' Room, which is online. They have a script library and they put lots of BBC drama on in their vault. So I think, yeah, I mean there is a lot in there. But you know, I think reading scripts is always a great exercise just to learn the different ways of doing it. But you know, in certain conventions and so forth, and particularly scene construction and pace, things like that. But ultimately, you just got to sit down and write it, right? And you know, there is, you know, I would just temper my usual kind of advice to read scripts with just to make sure that, you know, remember that when you're writing a script, you're writing your script, and for all the conventions that surround it, as long as you make yourself understandable to the reader and that they can see, you know, that you're writing in a way where they can see a film or TV series running based on the words that you're putting on the page, then I don't care. Right, about whether it's this convention, that convention, the other. All I care about is what do I see running up on screen in my mind's eye, and you know, there are you know, there's a number of different ways of doing that, and I would just, you know, always say to every writer just to embrace their own particular way of doing that, to make sure that there's a bit of them in the script as well.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ludo. That was illuminating as always.
Frank, are you waving goodbye, or are you waving for a question?
I have a question. Do you hear me?
Oh yes.
I have these new Bluetooth headphones in. So.
Okay.
All right. So I think it's like extremely important to understand the story editor's role as far as developing the script. I think this is new for me, and probably Adrian as well, as trying to figure out how we, as a producer, can navigate the editor's role between the producer and the writer. Because I guess from my perspective, originally it was kind of more what I thought of it as an editor was to take the script and kind of just cut and splice. Mm-hmm. And this experience working with you has definitely showed me that there's more in-depth understanding of what the script entails. I think it's very important to kind of go into depth into that.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I mean, I would say that there's a few different ways of working, and it differs in the UK. It differs particularly between film and television. So in TV, a script editor will quite often wield the red pen and do the cut and splice, as you call it. They will have administrative responsibility for the script, but they are also at liberty to make changes if the writer isn't around to do it. That's one of the reasons why the role exists. There's a sort of industrial need for that. But they also have to funnel notes from multiple executives to the writer, and now increasingly be part of a writer's room in some way, shape, or form. In the US, the script editor doesn't exist. you know, in the US, there's a very different way of working. There's a different legal basis on which writers are hired. And a writer's room has a very particular hierarchy, and therefore for which there is no need for a script editor, which is fine. And you know, it's a very, very useful and successful, obviously successful way of working in that medium. In film, in the single narrative, there is a need for anyone, any writer, to have a trusted, hopefully a number of trusted people that they can talk to about their work. And sometimes that's before a director comes on board, and sometimes that person will be a producer, and sometimes they will involve getting in someone like me to spend the time with the writer, and that's time that very often the producer may not have, and perhaps sometimes with skills that the producer may not have, to keep a project developing and moving forward. Because ultimately, let's face it, that's the cheap bit of the process. Once you get in front of camera, then the dollars start falling out of the wallet. Okay, so you want to make sure that the script is as good as it possibly can be before it goes in front of camera. Okay, it's that part of the process. Of course, it will change again in production, and it will change again in the edit. But you're always looking to try and find the story, try and find the right shape, try to make sure that it's making the most out of its conflict, that it's saying what it really wants to say, and that process. You know, very few people and very few films have ever been made off the back of their first draft, right? So it's about, you know, my job is to try and come in and help the writer get that script to where it needs to be. So I don't write, right? Some script editors do. I am not a writer. I do not sit down and write any scripts. The only thing I write is development notes. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, fantastic.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Ludo.
My absolute pleasure.
It's getting late now. It's way past 1 over there. So thank you so much for the time.
Cool. Well, lovely to see everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to reconnect with Jamaica. And I'll pop those couple of links in the chat while I go on mute and listen to Victoria.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, Ludo.
Cheers.
All right. Thanks. So our second guest is Victoria Rowell. She was raised by adoptive parents in a remote part of Maine, moved to Hollywood 30 years ago to become a successful actress with a 20-year run on The Young and the Restless and roles on Dumb and Dumber, then on Diagnosis Murder for an 8-season run. She went on to create 3 TV shows in which she currently stars: The Rich and the Ruthless, a soap opera comedy series, and Jacqueline and Jilly, a drama based on the opioid crisis. And most recently, Trash versus Treasure, an unscripted DIY series. Welcome, Victoria. Welcome to Jafta. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Adrian. And I really enjoyed listening to Ludo and the questions. And I must say, that is quite some background you have there.
He's pretty amazing. So tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us about your screen journey.
Well, I do want to say that I was not adopted. A lot of children are in care, but not adopted. But I had a primary foster parent who owned a farm in Maine. I was very fortunate to be raised by her. I had an opportunity as a child to win a classical scholarship to study ballet in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which led to American Ballet Theater in New York. And that was an amazing experience. There's something to be said about being a long distance runner, to see America hire its first African-American prima ballerina 75 plus years later. So ABT is my alma mater, and to see Misty Copeland in that position, I understand that she performed in Jamaica about a year ago, which was sold out immediately. She's a mentee of mine. I'm very proud of her, and to see the next generation take the baton. So my journey is not one-dimensional. I believe that being an artist is a sum of all of our experiences. And the discipline of classical ballet, the discipline of farming, really has been an anchor for me in Hollywood. 14 years on The Young and the Restless, that's CBS Sony. I went on to perform primetime 8 years opposite Dick Van Dyke in the murder mystery realm for Viacom, and which is now on Hallmark, and is popular in the UK, the murder mystery piece. I'm a big fan of UK soaps, Coronation Street in particular. I have been producing for many, many years live productions. So I encourage people, even if it's a small production, if it's a production for charity, it all matters. Just do the work. If you don't get the part, then help in the wardrobe department. If you didn't get the first AC job, then be a production assistant. I mean, it all matters, right? I've had the great privilege of working with Eddie Murphy, Will Smith, Beau Bridges, just a lot of phenomenal, Forrest Whitaker, who's going to be starring in Jingle Jangle, coming out on Netflix. I heard you talk about Netflix. Big movie produced by David E. Talbert and Lynn Talbert. John Legend is a producer. So I've worked with Sam Jackson, just really, really fortunate. And, you know, we're at a very important time. I think the COVID pause is so important for us all to check our humanity. And with Black Lives Matter mattering globally now, I mean, Black lives have always mattered. It's just that not everyone thought that they mattered. And for me, as it pertains, because we're talking about the entertainment industry, it is an extraordinary period because we are seeing some C-suite changes, some corporate suites with people of color behind the desks who can pull the trigger, can greenlight films, and not give a person of color $2 million to make the movie and give Karen 20 million. So there's been that disparity where there's so little room for people of color to even get in the room with a Netflix or an HBO or broadcast, let alone get a budget. And it's rarely seen parity. So I'm excited about the climate right now, about the push, about all the hard artivist work during my own career and producing. I mean, I didn't see growth opportunities for me as a Black female writer, director, producer. And so I reinvented myself. I really cultivated good content and also collaborating with others, creating content and supporting other people's content, not just my own, but how can I help? I may not be a producer on this production, but okay, I know this person, let me be a liaison. Let me try to help you find this DP or this director or these actors so that you win, because if you win, I win. So it's been 30 years in Hollywood, and I'm seeing some change, but this change, this movement cannot be based on a moment. This movement has to continue until we see economic inclusion, not only in the United States, but broadly across the board.
Was there something in particular that prompted your desire to move from in front of the lens to behind the camera? Was there anything particular that happened, or was it just something you always wanted to do?
I mean, Adrian, there's so many stories I could tell you. I mean, the disparity is breathtaking. There are many circumstances that I endured as a Black female entertainer. And also just, you know, when you consider that the former president of the network I worked for, CBS, was making over $60 million a year. Yet when I championed and did win the hiring of a single Black union writer, Writers Guild of America writer, what I had to do to make that happen was extraordinary. And the question begs, why? Why was I made to jump through hoops of fire just for presenting very qualified persons, not only in the writing realm, but in hair and makeup? And, you know, I worked for this company for an aggregate of 22 years, yet, and still, to have that kind of legacy with the company, I was still treated with a high level of disrespect and pushback and retaliation to suppress me talking about the lack of economic inclusion and diversity. But I feel that if you do not use your voice, then you are complicit. And at the end of the day, we can talk about, you know, scripts and shows and how to do this, that, and the third. But until we have equal standing, until we have parity in the executive offices, we're not going to see the systemic change that needs to happen so that we can get into the room and have equal footing so that we can be competitive. We're talking about union jobs. We're talking about, for a feature film, I mean, these writers are getting $500,000 for one script. And equally talented people of color. The quotient is so extraordinarily anemic in comparison. So no, I've really been about not only finding jobs for myself, but finding jobs for others and people who look like me, because I know the suffering that takes place, not only in Hollywood, but globally. I know what it's like not to have your voice heard.
So you've been doing more and more work in Jamaica in recent years.
Yes.
What do you find Jamaica as a location brings to your productions? What's that indefinable something?
I mean, Adrian, there are many things. I mean, I had to make a list so I didn't forget all that I wanted to say. But I've been coming to Jamaica. I've been just viscerally pulled to Jamaica since the late 70s when I made my first visit, and I've been back and forth since as recently as last December. Okay, the energy. First of all, the energy is healing to me. I'm rejuvenated when I go there. I'm rejuvenated while I'm working there. And if you can work and make something happen in Jamaica, you can work anywhere. There's boots on the ground. I work with the lab. I work with Kamala Bennett. I hire in Jamaica. So for example, I work with Michael Kushney. He's my editor. I work with hair and makeup team. I hire all of my support systems in the camera. It's all there. And I can't say enough about Kamala Bennett. I enjoy licensing my music. I source some of my music from Jamila. I don't know if you know Jamila Falak. But one of her signature songs is the crux of my movie, Jacqueline and Jilly, which we screened at Palace Cinema last year as a fundraiser for a girls' residency. I believe in creating content that I can then repurpose for purpose. So on 2 occasions, I've been able to bring content to Jamaica and screen it either for Glen Hope Orphanage in Kingston, with the help of Dr. Wendell Abel. And also we've screened at the University of West Indies content that may not have been filmed in Jamaica. But back to the attention on filming in Jamaica, yes, Diane Edwards, Renee Robinson, All Day Long, Jampro, very supportive. But I have to say, the collaborations that I've been met with, as I mentioned, with Kamala Bennett, the lab, even NCB Bank last year was a part of the screening with Mr. Graham. Also the actors. The actors are amazing. Like Zebek, who's in Snakebite right now, is a wonderful actor that I've been able to pitch, for example, to BET. I'm looking for some trans-global collaborations as well. I love that the equipment is on the ground in Jamaica. So you don't have to bring every single lens. You don't have to, I can't emphasize enough the boots on the ground for production, high quality production, and where we don't have the tax credits, Adrian, yet in this administration. And I believe that our Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, wants to see that happen, so that we're bringing more production in. I know that there's flyovers sans COVID, I get that, but people are going to the Dominican Republic, people are going to other countries rather than landing in Jamaica, where I believe we possess some of unparalleled topography. So those are just some of the examples. I have camera persons there, I have hair and makeup people there, I have actors there. I've worked with Oliver Samuels. You have one of the best DPs there, Gabriella Blackwell, who's extraordinary. She was Gabrielle Blackwood, who was the DP for the movie, oh God, don't tell me, Flight. And that was directed by Kia Moses. And I endeavor to work with Gabriella Blackwood. So, I could go on and on. There's a way to work in Jamaica. You cut deals with the hotels, try to work with the Board of Tourism. There's a way to get to Rome. You may not have that tax credit, but you can work out a deal and successfully film on a budget in Jamaica.
Have you experienced any particular challenges in selling diversity content?
Well, I'm a Black woman in America. So all day long. However,
but it is getting easier though, isn't it?
I'm not saying that. No.
Okay.
I'm going to say that we are in a season where there is opportunity, but the pressure must remain on and not let up. Recently Channing Dungey, it was announced in Variety, has been appointed to Warner Brothers Television, and that will affect HBO content. A Black executive who is highly respected in the industry. These kinds of hirings will make a difference in terms of getting content made, and not only seen here in the States, of course, but globally. Sure. I've had projects optioned by HBO, and I've presented writers that I think, and I'm just saying generally now, I've presented writers on projects that I think are appropriate to write the story. And I ended up in London meeting with a woman who didn't know where the A train went. And it's disheartening, when you work that hard to get into the room with HBO and they've optioned your New York Times book. My book is titled The Women Who Raised Me. And I'm in London. And I've presented 3 perfectly fabulous Black writers in the United States. So, I've had a lot of challenge in getting content, but I'm not alone. And so the consortium of people that I know, we try to support each other. It's not one thing that makes something work or not work. You know, Mark Johnson, who's a celebrated non-Black executive Oscar winner, has supported me getting content, you know, made, getting it made. I mean, it really requires a village to get a project off the ground. And sometimes it happens 20 years later. Good friend of mine is Peter Medic. We've worked together. And then sometimes it happens seemingly much faster. Right now, there is a scramble, you know, as Ludo said, there's carnage. Because of COVID, productions were stopped. Productions they're unfinished. Yet these are more higher budgeted productions, right? So the smaller your production was, the smaller the budget, the more nimble you are to pivot, to be able to get your projects done. So I've just completed season 4 of The Rich and the Ruthless. We launched Trash versus Treasure, which we shot one of the episodes in Grants Pen in Kingston last year. I shot in advance. I can't tell you why. I had an intuition to do as much work last year as I could, but AMC Networks, UMC was pleased that they could launch the season of Trash versus Treasure, our first season, on the Urban Movie Channel and Amazon Prime Video. I think there's a lot to be said for smaller budgeted productions, for the very reason that it's rather cumbersome for a large budgeted production right now. There's more COVID protocol. There's a lot to consider with COVID. When we just filmed The Rich and the Ruthless here in LA, I had to have a set medic on set every day. I had to have the nurse come in and do rapid testing twice a week. It's SAG-AFTRA, it's union. There's a lot to consider, and your budget has to be enhanced because you have to buy the PPE. You have to have the sanitation going on. All the meals have to be individually packaged. You have to pay someone to hand each person the meal so the food is not handled by anyone else. And the union reps come to set and they will shut you down if you're not following the COVID protocols, as they should.
Right.
So there's a lot going on. I am curious what Jamaica's doing. I do have a project that I want to shoot in Jamaica next year about immigration with the lab. And so we're keeping close eyes on COVID in Jamaica.
Most of your productions so far have been for television and streaming, right? Do you have any plans for feature films, big screen productions?
No, I think big screens are problematic right now.
Focus, right? I got you.
They're problematic. I appreciated, what Ludo was saying, but drive-ins are on the uptick for.
Yeah, our one of our drive-ins is opening again on Friday, I think. Yeah.
You have an amazing location, Adrian, that Jampro took me to, and it's been shuttered for a while.
I think was that in New Kingston?
I don't know. It's on the ocean. Like
that was out by must be Harborview. Yeah.
I mean, this place is Ludo. You have to see this place.
It was beautiful. Yeah, it was so much fun going out there to watch movies back in the day. Yeah.
The drive-in is right at the edge on a cliff, and then this ocean. I'm like, what am I looking at? And they said that was the drive-in. I'm like, what?
Yeah. It was great. It was great.
So drive-ins are making a comeback, and I think for big screen movies that is a consideration. We have cemeteries here in Hollywood that are popular destinations to screen films, believe it or not.
Wow.
Because of the acreage, because of the parking facilities, because cemeteries can be beautiful. And so it's a mindset. Of course, they also show horror movies.
Right.
But people are trying to figure out different ways that they can show a movie, have a movie experience, but outdoors with social distancing.
Is that where you see things going for the future in terms of the distribution model for film?
I mean, I think that it's such a broadly discussed problem, if you will. I mean, no one knows exactly how the film industry is going to survive this. But I will tell you, just in terms of YouTube consumption, and I had to write down the stat, but the YouTube app is consumed 97% by Black people, and beyond that would be Netflix at 39%. That's a big subscription base.
Right.
So more and more YouTube and Netflix are looking to enhance the diversity in their content. It only makes sense. Here in the States anyway, we're at 1.3 trillion in spending, yet ad companies aren't increasing, ads with our content. So that has to, that it's all something that we all have to look at across the board. I mean, we can't talk about diversification and being included if you're really not giving us the same financial parity once again.
Right. Right. Well, I think that's all the questions I had. I'd like to open it up now to anyone else who may have any questions for Victoria. Raise your hand, or does anyone have anything?
I want to say that I just finished a script. I hired Mazan Morrison, who's a wonderful Jamaican writer. I don't know, are you familiar with her?
Yes, I know her. Yeah.
So yeah, we just finished a script, and excited. I mean, a lot of resources in Jamaica.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of talent. I think Frank has a question.
Sure. Hi, Frank.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good.
All right, so I guess the quick question is there any genre-specific content that you're interested in as far as producing for Jamaica, and as well as narratives or episodics, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, all of it. I'm a very flexible artist. I think once again, you have to be a reed in the wind. I've done a lot of comedy. I mean, that was my first opportunity, if you will. I love comedy. I've worked with Eddie Murphy. I've worked with Jim Carrey. I've worked with Jeff Daniels, Will Smith, Bill Cosby. I've worked with a lot of funny guys, and I love comedy. And I've worked with Oliver Samuels, and he's actually in my soap. He plays a recurring character. And we've talked about doing something at the Little Theater after COVID. We want to work together more. So comedy is very important to me. But at the same time, I love drama. And I love historical fiction. So I don't have one particular, I do it all on camera. I'm getting ready to direct a movie for Viacom CBS BET, a Christmas movie called A Rich Christmas in Maryland. We start shooting on December 2nd. And it has levity in it, but also drama. I mean, if you can get a hybrid like that, I mean, that's like the best of both worlds. But so I don't paint myself in a box. Yeah.
Anything else? Noelle, you had a question?
Am I allowed? Am I allowed, Adrian?
Yes, you're allowed. You're allowed.
I think I don't know if it's too general a question, but I'm an actor living in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Who started producing because there wasn't enough acting work for me living in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Because in all honesty, being mixed race,
yep,
there are less roles for me here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you have any advice just in terms of the acting aspect and staying here but acting, or would you be like, Noelle, you just got to get on a plane, or it's pointless, or
Well, you know, as a mixed race person myself, I identify as Black, but of course I was, never right for that particular role. And I knew going in, but I still went up. I still got up to bat no matter what. Because Black is so many things. Black is blonde, Black is white, Black is Black, Black is so many things, Black is Blasian. So, look at our vice president, candidate, Kamala Harris. I feel like you have to go.
No, you're vice president.
Speak it
you're
into
vice
being.
president.
Yes, thank you. And Jamaican, I might add. Right? Her dad was Jamaican. You know that, right? So, look, I went up to bat. I went up for everything. If they said, I'm sorry, the Burger King commercial, we're just doing, the white casting call, I still win. Because I thought it was ridiculous. I thought if you're right for the role, you're right for the role. So for Diagnosis Murder, which was 8 years with Viacom, they were not seeing Black actresses. But I told my agent, listen, basically, you gotta submit me, at least submit me. And I'm working for the company already, because CBS and Viacom are, they're the same company. So I went in and I got the part. I think you just have to just keep slinging spaghetti against the wall. And in terms of being in Jamaica, not enough acting work. Keep yourself sharp, study monologues, do the church plays, I know now COVID, of course, I understand COVID, but work on a monologue, work on a one-woman show, write something about your experience as a mixed race person, write about the hardship of it, the ism within the race, because there is an ism within our race. So I find that very topical. I find it very necessary to have transparency about who you are, because your story affects millions of the people who may not have the courage to even talk about it, because there is, unfortunately, the reality of being mixed race, and due to colonialism, due to plantocracy, I call it plantocracy, but a plantocracy of thinking, that you're not allowed to embrace all of who you are, which is awful, and it's not fair. So, I don't identify as my Irish British mother. I mean, I identify as a Black woman, but I don't deny her or deny that she is part of me. So that story is really interesting. I'd come and watch that show. I want to know more. So think about developing content for yourself, because, as Ludo was saying, no one else is going to write your story but you. There's a show called Orthodox. It's on Netflix. It's an incredible story. You know about it? This is a brilliantly executed, the protagonist, she is brilliant. And it's very well executed. And they shot it entirely in Berlin. They studied the atmosphere of Williamsburg, Brooklyn, New York, where the story is supposed to take place, but the whole production was filmed. Then they went to Berlin, and that was twofold, because, of course, unfortunately, Hasidic Jews were persecuted during Nazism, and so they wanted to go back and shoot this movie in Berlin for a political purpose, but also well, look, it's an amazing story about a woman's journey and who she is. So take a look at it.
It's on my list. I'm gonna go watch that.
All right.
But thank you. I appreciate the words of encouragement, the words of get off my butt and just do it.
Yeah, and get on a plane. If you, I mean, look, you need a representative. You need an agent. You don't need a manager. You need a manager when you've got 2 jobs and you're on Broadway. But if you can find representation, and you've got some good agents there in Jamaica who have New York contacts, perhaps you could work it that way.
I think Kurt has a question.
Yeah, just as a follow-up now, I guess, because Noel and we've worked together all the time, but she is the producer, I write and I direct. But I was just curious because in terms of a developmental standpoint, and I know that you're talking about how you come down and you've done, like an episode of something here, you've done like a piece of something here, and then, the rest of it is shot wherever, like be it LA or wherever. What is your viewpoint on like the possibility? We're talking budget wise, maybe we even exclude COVID from the equation for a moment.
Sure.
But just budget wise, and being able to put something like that together. The realistic idea of doing an entire season of something in Jamaica, be it a Jamaican based story, be it something about a character from overseas who, happens to be in Jamaica for a year, whatever. Obviously, whenever a lot of the international productions come down, I'm so glad to hear you talk about, like the crews out here and stuff. Like I've worked in AD for like almost 15 years now, and like we've worked on stuff for Marvel. We just got to work on James Bond last year.
Yes.
And like we know, you don't necessarily always get the opportunity, but we know how to handle ourselves.
That's right.
But the thing is that in terms of, you look at something like a Queen Sono on Netflix, which is just straight up just an African show, and it's like doing the equivalent of something like that in Jamaica, where you have 10 episodes, just 10 solid episodes done in Jamaica. Are we getting closer to the possibilities that something that's just excessively expensive because you have to fly in? I know on Bond, all of the grunt crew, everybody, it was great, was Jamaican. All of the HODs were from England or their respect, but they were European. Even if it's a situation like that, I think that more and more I'm just trying to find out the possibilities. Is it unrealistic? You know what I mean? From a financial point of view.
No, it's not unrealistic, and there's different budgets, right? And a lot of these licensing companies, they want you to take the risk. So, you're acquiring the money as an independent producer. But at the same time, you have the creative freedom to create what you want to create and then present. And there's risk in that, right? Because either a licensing platform, a streaming platform is going to say, well, we like it or we don't like it, or maybe they're going to recut it or what have you. But for example, with The Rich and the Ruthless, which is a dram-com, we shot half of it in Jamaica and the other half in LA. And it was a big undertaking and it was well worth it. To do a full season, of course it's possible. I'm trying to get something happening, as I mentioned, next year, but that would be a movie that would be completely, well, not completely, there's a US piece to it, but we were thinking about cheating the US in Jamaica so that we filmed the entire spend of the production would be in Jamaica. Again, the difficulty is there are no tax credits. So when you think if you can shoot in Atlanta and get a 30% tax credit, or shoot in Virginia and get 25%, LA 25%, Oklahoma 35 to 50. Yeah. I mean, that's why Scorsese was going there to shoot his big war movie. I shot in Oklahoma a year ago as talent, but I learned a lot. I mean, it's just remarkable, the tax credit. So anyway, all that said, it's hard when there's not an incentive to come to Jamaica and do the spend, regardless of everything I've said. And I'm always, you know, singing the praises of production in Jamaica. It's hard to get around that piece with investors. Like, why? What? Okay, then who's the carrier? Do we have a deal with a flight, you know, with an air carrier? Do we have a deal with? It becomes very basic. It's just rudimentary math, right? Like, what are we getting back? But I do think it's possible, as I said earlier, to shoot there and cut deals. So I cut a deal with Secrets Hotel in Mo Bay when I was filming there. All inclusive, it made sense, and other deals, but it's laborious, you know, because it's a la carte, you know, you're cutting this deal. Whereas if you have a tax credit, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, you know,
Yeah.
it's unfortunately, it's been I feel like it's getting better, but it's definitely been like this has been going on from before I was even interested in the film industry. And I know that Renee and Jampro have been doing a lot towards pushing the government in that direction, but I'm very glad to hear that people like you are bringing things down, because I think that the more things come down, the Marvels, the Bonds, of this, everyone says the same thing, mind you, about it would be fantastic if we could get the tax credit. But I think the more things that we can get coming to Jamaica, it kind of shows the government, who are not on the creative side necessarily, that this is a business and this is a money-making thing.
Exactly.
More
you know, and they've got to know that. I mean, because Ava Gardner was, you know, they were shooting in Jamaica in the 1940s, the big studios. I mean, Jamaica has been a hub for features for many, many years. But the resources there, again, even the studio space, the sound studio space that I have toured, even at TVJ, I did a licensing deal with TVJ at one point with Claire Grant. And she said, well, do you think you could use these studios? And I was like, yeah. I mean, there's a number of studios that I've toured in Jamaica. There's the public broadcast studios over by the bus station. There are those studios. There are the studios. Oh, what is that fabulous university, Adrian? It's like a teaching university with sound stages and
sound stages.
I can't think of it right now.
Yeah, I can't think what that with sound stages. I can't think where that would be.
CPTC.
Yeah,
that's what it could be. Yeah.
Yes. And then CBM has sound stages. Anyway, there's lots of real estate if you wanted to build out sets and things there.
Yeah. All right, we have another question from Shervado Oliver, who's driving right now, so she can't ask herself. But this is for Victoria. What has been your most fulfilling thing for you artistically, especially seeing that you're so versed in many areas of business?
Cultivating jobs. I love cultivating jobs in the industry. It makes me so happy. It is, I love the familial aspect of productions. I mean, I don't like that we're like a circus and we disband. Like the next day it's just gone when you wrap. But I love the family that we create, and I love how unique we all are that make us whole as an ensemble operation. It's miraculous that we have to show up. So much trust is a part of coming together and creating not only the cast, but also, you know, the crew. I mean, it all has to be an ensemble effort. And
absolutely. And you have to trust that everybody knows what they're doing, because you can't follow up. Yeah.
Right. Well, you know, there are teachable moments on every set. I don't care how far up the food chain you are. Things go sideways when you're filming. and it can't be helped. It happens. And, you know, you're dealing with life on life's terms, and where you might have the most brilliant, oh, I don't know, you might have the most brilliant first AC, you know, maybe that person's going through a divorce, you know, you just don't, people, life is happening, life is in session. And so there has to be compassion on set. You don't know what people are going through. You try to shore each other up, not just like, you know, fire a person. You just want to stay whole.
Yes, absolutely. We produced a show called In the Dance, and the first day of shooting, my father died 4 hours before, and we had to hold it together and get the show shot on the first day. Shocking. And that was really a process to try and get through that, myself and my sister. We have Nadine Rollins has got a question. Nadine, are you unmuted?
Hello.
Oh,
Hi.
Hi, Victoria. Hi. Really, really great to meet you. I recently finished a screenwriting film lab, and I entered the film lab as a producer. Just a quick background of myself. I am an actor, has been doing that now for over 20 years. Wonderful. And, you know, and just started to do producing. I manage talents as well. And I really love filmmaking. But when I finished that film lab, I literally felt like I was ready to pack up my marbles and go home, because it's really daunting. It's tremendous work. And
and then you have the revenue waterfall after all of that.
and the waterfall is like, at the end of the day, you're like, why am I doing
what?
But the thing is that I really, really love it. And when I listen to yourself speak, and Ludo and all of these industry players, it's enlightening and it's uplifting. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna trot another day. You mentioned that Misty Copeland is a mentee. Do you yourself mentor folks in the industry? Because I would really like to sign up, or if you could just tell us where, because if it's not you, if it's any other persons who are doing the work like you, who have really made it for themselves, who knows the trials that it takes. And all I need to know, listen, this is not the path you should take this path. That's all I need to know, that it will encourage me to continue. Well, is there a mentorship program that you have that I could sign up, or any of us could sign up to be a part of?
Nadine, I'd be completely honest with you. Yes. I do mentor. I am at capacity. And so I'm going to mentor you right now. So tell me right now, what is it that I can possibly advise you on?
Okay, well, currently I'm working on a passion project, and we're at script development stage. Mm-hmm. We need to get, we're confident that we have a hit on our hands. We're very confident about that. We have done the proof of concept. We're pushing it out there in terms of screening and festivals. Our main objective is to get development funding. Mm-hmm. So we could proceed into principal photography, but we need money to do that. Right. The doors that we've been knocking on, yes, you know, they'll say, well, we don't do development. Generally, that's what we're hearing. If we go to market with what we have, typically we are hearing, okay, do you have funding or equity set aside already? Of course, you know, we don't have that. Right. But my primary interest is how we can seek development funding, because, I mean, a lot of us, including myself, we have to do the hustle in order to pay the bills. And so it's very difficult for us to sustain our livelihood with what we're doing now. So, you know, it's just to seek out development funding. Sure. That's actually my primary interest right now.
That is typically everyone's primary interest. I mean, certainly the content is so important, right? Because you have to have good content and competitive content. You know, they say when you have an invention, 10 other people have the same invention. It's who's able to get it. So in terms of raising funds, development monies, however you want to term it, there are different ways to go about it. Obviously, you can crowdfund. Have you thought of crowdfunding?
Well, actually, that's what we're doing right now. We're looking at Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So because we've heard about crowdfunding, and definitely we're going to embark on that. So keeping our fingers crossed that we'll get some mileage from that.
So that's a good start. You're being proactive. I've done Yes, I've done Kickstarter in the past. It's tricky, right? Because they want you to determine how much it is that you're trying to raise, and then if you don't reach that threshold, then you don't get to keep the funds. So I think it's very, very important that you, as I said earlier in the interview, be nimble, don't undercut yourself, but don't overpromise yourself and endure a disappointment. I say really look at maybe how can this budget, a smaller budget, maybe we all look for blue sky, right?
Right.
Can I minimize this budget so that it's accessible? I can manifest this amount of money and I can still create. Is it a film short that you're creating?
No, it's a film feature.
Okay. So that's a bigger, but it's an independent feature. Really look at what your blue sky budget is and what an alternate budget would be that you could live with and still create the content. Now you're going to have to take some cuts, maybe not as many locations, but someone told me many years ago when she got her film made, she said, Vicki, I had to give something away to get it done.
Yeah.
And that's sage advice. You've got to give away something to get it done. And sometimes it's part of the content. Sometimes it's the star.
I thought you were saying like mortgage my house, but okay.
Well, no. I'm not telling you to do.
I was like, okay.
Who did that? Did Spike Lee do that? Somebody
maybe.
I'm not telling you to do that. No, John Singleton. I think John
did that. Okay.
God bless him. But be wise.
Okay.
And sometimes people raise enough money for the short first. And then that becomes the proof of concept for the bigger budgeted movie.
Yeah, that's where we are now. So we did a proof of concept. So we're now going to jump into a Kickstarter. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that will work out for us.
Well, consider raising enough money for a short.
Okay.
During COVID, because that is part of the scenario now. People are struggling. The discretionary money is drying up. So you have to think along those lines, what can I realistically raise funds for?
Yeah, you mentioned the short. I really didn't think about that, but
Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
but about that mentorship program, when you're down to a doable rate to get somebody in, I'll
be in touch with Adrian.
Thank you, Adrian, please.
I'll be in touch with Adrian.
I think Nadine's concern was when we heard in the last session that Harry Potter still hadn't turned a profit. so I think at that point we're all like, what are we doing in this business?
Let's go.
Okay, we have another
Victoria,
question.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, we have another question from Shabrado, who is no longer on the road driving.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good evening.
Hi.
Firstly, I want to say thank you to Ludo and to you, Victoria, for your insight. It is truly appreciated by us all and by me. And my question to you, Victoria, is I heard you speaking about the challenges as it relates to coming to a location, filming, especially coming down with crew from the US. And I have a little bit of insight on that because last year I got cast as the lead in a TV series that should have been shot in New York. Now, I was to be in New York now filming. However, because of COVID, we had to scrap those plans. Now, a part of that series would have been shot in Jamaica, like a large part of the series, right?
Sure.
And because of the whole situation, we well, the production company is a US-based production company, and the thing got picked up by, I think, Buffalo 8 in LA or somewhere.
Right.
And they were going to do the proof of concept, and they were told that they had to have the whole, you know, particulars in place. Now, other companies in other Caribbean islands were bidding for us to shoot there and pretend it was Jamaica, right?
Yeah, sure.
And the same thing that you had to do, they had to do it on a different scale. So what I wanted to know is that a general challenge that you guys face coming down, or is it just like a one-off because it's maybe not a major studio project, or you know, I know there's no shortcut. I know that.
I never have a challenge, darling, when I come to Jamaica. First, I get my callaloo, and then I go relax, and then I call my friends, and then I get busy with the business. I never have a challenge in Jamaica. So that's number one. Number two, production, I am very focused and very determined to work where I work. So when I commit to Jamaica, I commit to Jamaica. Sure, do I have people in the industry say, why are you always going to Jamaica to work? I said, because I love it. I have friends in Jamaica. I feel very comfortable. I feel like it's a home away from home. So I never feel challenged. It's not really a challenge. It's really something that I hope will manifest one day. And that is a tax credit.
Right.
A tax credit only enhances the production budget, because what you spend, a portion of what you spend, 25, 30% of what you spend comes back into the coffers of the production company, which only will inspire the production company, in my case, to want to continue to film in Jamaica. You see what I'm saying? It's a reinvestment back in the country or the state where you're working to want to do more business. So it's a great incentive to create a tax credit. I know it's been discussed in the Observer and the Gleaner over time. I've had many a conversation. I've had really good meetings with Minister Babsy Grange. I've had the pleasure of a quick conversation with Prime Minister Andrew Holness. I've talked to Minister Edmund Bartlett, Board of Tourism, and many others, because I know the validity of having a tax credit, not only for my own productions, but other people who are interested to come to Jamaica and work.
Right.
But they need to be incentivized. You see what I'm saying?
And I thank you for that, because, you know, because I mean, when you see productions coming in, and especially as an actor, you turn up, you audition, you know, you get a role, and, you know, you go to work. You know, I don't really have a lot of insight on the production side of it. However, because this production company, when they brought me on board, they asked me to, you know, just give them a little insight on the back end, on some things on the ground and so forth. So I got a little bit more knowledge of it. And then I felt, you know, pretty much like I was a fish out of water. I didn't know if it was that case all the time. Yeah. So when I heard you mention it, I was like, wow. I mean, it's not, you know, it's not so much of a strange situation. And then to hear how you navigated it, and that they pretty much did the same thing, you know, it kind of gave me some hope. So, you know, sure. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you for your question and your insight.
Thank you.
Keep going, man. Keep going.
Yeah, we are. We're gonna be shooting in January in New York. You know, they did the paperwork and everything, so we're all set.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Roberto. Anyone else? Any other questions?
While you're surveying, if there are any more questions, I just want to say, I want to give a shout out to the Calabash Literary Festival, which I love, in St. Elizabeth, and all the fabulous stories that come out of that festival, all the poetry.
Yes, Marlon James was featured in that a couple of years ago. And his book just got top 100 fantasy stories of all time by Time Magazine. Yeah, by New Yorker. Yeah, it was great.
All the crafts persons that are there.
Absolutely.
It's really a great festival, and I hope it'll be back soon. I mean, I know it's every other year, right? It's every 2 years,
Yes, I believe so.
but it couldn't happen this year because of COVID, I'm pretty sure. And I also want to do a shout out to Great Huts that does a film festival.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I'm looking
They
forward
host
to
our propeller.
talking.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, I want to thank you so much, Victoria and Ludo.
Can
Ludo has a question.
I've got the opportunity just to come in on a couple of things, just very briefly.
You're not in bed?
I know. So I may fall asleep while I'm talking. I'm back to my Jamaican immigration officer story. No. So just a couple of things very quickly. Nadine, on Kickstarter, and for anyone else thinking of doing it, just be aware that most of the successful campaigns on Kickstarter are run by successful people. So you've got to think about what you're against and what you might need to fill that gap. So just be, and I mean, obviously I know your project, but just be aware that what you're trying to, the phrase that I hear at the moment is affinity groups. You're cultivating groups of people who are interested in your project. Think about where you might find them, and also think about champions.
Yeah.
So champions who are successful or have a reasonable following already in some way, shape, or form that become that you then approach about your project. And even if they're not going to be in it, they're not going to produce it, they're not even going to maybe even put money in it. If they can show some love towards it, then that will translate into people coming to finding you on Kickstarter.
That's
so
right.
No,
go ahead.
Victoria.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that, Nadine. I meant to mention there's a group, and I don't know if it will cross over, but try. It's called Women in Film in the States, and they support female filmmakers, of course, and with an emphasis on minority female filmmakers. So please,
we have a local chapter.
In Film has a local.
Okay, so Women in Film, I absolutely would look into Women in Film.
Great suggestion there. And
Ludo, sorry, you mentioned champions. That's
champions. So just finding someone to
crowdfunding.
Sorry. Find someone to champion your project.
Okay.
So you can look to the music world, or and they don't have to be in Jamaica, right? But they can be wherever around the world. But somebody who you think has might be interested in your project in a way that can bring other people to it.
That's right.
Right. So it's about using that to your, and be smart about who you approach, who might be interested, who then will be happy to bring their audience to your project.
Okay.
Switching tack slightly.
I wanted to add one other thing. And this is not just for Nadine, but for any of our filmmakers, to really check out what Digicel and Flow may be doing for new filmmakers or are not new filmmakers, but they also need content. All of the devices are looking for content. So I do highly recommend that you go to Flow and Digicel websites and just see if there's anything there that you can participate in or get funding from.
And thank you very much, Victoria, for the excellent segue, when I was about to point out that I am also working for a company that makes this kind of content. Okay, so this is a company called Whatify, and they're currently Apple only, but they will be coming to Android in the next few months, hopefully, and they make hackable movies. Okay, so these are short film hackable movies. So you decide, it's off the back of the old choose your own adventure style. You go this way or that way through the film, and we've got a couple of movies up now, one on the way, and a lot more to come. And you can if have a play around with it. If it's the sort of thing that interests you, if you think I think I could have a go at one of these, this form is in its infancy, but they have money to make movies, right? So and they don't care where they film it, right? You can be wherever, in this case in Jamaica. If they like the idea, they will put some development finance behind it, and they will help you make it a What-ify film. And in fact, there's, well, I could go into a lot of detail, but I won't know about how they do that. But if it's something that interests you as a storytelling format, you think that you could bring something interesting to it, then you can pitch. And they have proper money to make proper films.
So that's a branching narrative. That's basically what you're
branching narrative.
Okay.
And they have a particular format. So there's 5 sequences. So you have 4 decision points. And so each one is kind of a short film, sort of 15 to 25 minutes long. But there's one beginning, pretty much, and that gives you 16 endings.
Wow.
So
I just saw that Carrie Ann Washington just said hi. You know Carrie Ann, phenomenal dancer.
Oh, wow.
Adrian.
No. I don't.
All right. She wanted
no, Carrie Washington. I don't know Carrie Ann Washington. No.
Maybe I got Carrie Ann's last name wrong, but anyway, I'm terrible with names. But anyway, Carrie Ann is a wonderful dancer.
Okay.
And she's also a teacher at Edna Manley. Anyway, I just saw her in the
Carrie Ann Henry.
Huh?
Carrie Ann Henry.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yes.
I made up her last name.
She's a phenomenon.
Hi, Carrie Ann.
Okay.
Anyway.
So and then the other thing was just I believe it's coming out on Amazon next month, November and December. But there is an anthology miniseries called Small Axe, which I have seen bits of, which is made by the BBC and Amazon, and that's about set in the West Indian community in West London. So it's Windrush, a post-Windrush generation. And the stories take place roughly between the late 60s and early 80s. I've seen a couple of them. They are absolutely amazing. I don't care whether they're film or TV. They've been shown there's been shown in some cinemas. They're also being shown on the small screen. They work in either. I mean, it's quite outstanding storytelling there. But also, again, these are, going back to the cultural specificity issue, these are stories which have happened they're all pretty much all based on true stories. These are all happened in one of the most famous cities in the world, London. That's where I am right now. Okay, so we have a whole history of storytelling, but we also have a whole history of unspoken stories, and finally these stories are being told beautifully and brilliantly on a global platform, right? So, and I think that, and also in ways which are, I think you'll find, and judging by the first 2 that I've seen, are by no means straightforward in their storytelling. They're incredibly impressionistic and artistic.
Wow.
So please do check that out. I'd be very interested to hear your response on that.
And I'd like to wish everyone a happy holiday in advance. I have to jump off. I don't know that you have any other questions for me.
No, there don't seem to be any. I think we're good.
This was great sharing the platform with you.
Likewise, Victoria.
I want to talk to you more. I'll get your information with your permission from Adrian, because I'd like to talk to you about Ireland and filming there.
Of course, anything.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thanks so much, Victoria. I really appreciate it. Lots of great information. I think everyone here appreciated it. Thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. At Victoria Rowell on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cool. Night, guys.
Thanks so much. I know it's late for you. Thanks so much for everything.
Dude, I'm so proud of you for lasting this long. I'm so proud.
It's amazing.